growth at Startle. We are a music and tech supplier to hospitality and retail, and we specialise in curating unique experiences that achieve a brand's objectives by building their desired emotions and behaviour in customers, and ultimately helping them achieve their objectives through the power of music. So today I'm going to talk about the use of data and behavioural science in creating a music experience that not only builds a great atmosphere, but that influences customers with intent so that you know the actual impact you're having on the customer experience. And to start off, I'm going to talk a little bit more broadly about the use of music in hospitality. So when we talk about business resilience and success, music is not typically going to be the first thing that comes to mind. It's often treated as a bit of an afterthought, a bit of a nice to have, and not given the kind of care or thought that it warrants. But what we're talking about here is something that has a massive impact on the customer experience. And music has been proven to impact humans' emotions and their health and moods in so many ways. So reducing anxiety, stress, improving mood, amongst other things. And I'm sure you'll agree that how sort of enjoyable or relaxing or vibrant an experience is largely down to the atmosphere. So music plays a huge role in this. And not only that, but it can impact your staff hugely as well. So there have been loads of studies into kind of the right types of music and how they can be a real motivator to staff and increase productivity. But if you get it wrong, it can have the complete opposite effect. So kind of being distracting and actually quite harmful to people's mental health potentially. So for example, if playlists are overly repetitive. And it can also aid your commercial objectives. So whether this is influencing customer spend or impacting your footfall over various day parts. And that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit more in this webinar. So looking just a little bit more deeply into the impacts of music. So for example, firstly, music can reduce heart rate, blood pressure, stress and anxiety. The right type of music can improve and speed up athletic performance. So I'm sure any sort of athletes or gym bunnies will agree that sort of upbeat and motivating music really helps you to kind of work harder. It promotes good mental health as well. So by the body releasing hormones like dopamine, serotonin and oxytocin, which are all chemicals that are associated with sort of pleasure and happiness. It can improve memory and slow cognitive decline. So for example, there was a study into dementia patients which found this. And it can treat various conditions such as insomnia. And these are just kind of a few ways that music's been proven to impact us. So all of this just backs up really how powerful music can be if it's used in the right way. And not only that, but music has been used in many studies across hospitality. So it can influence menu choices. It can increase or decrease dwell time or customer turnover. It can actually drive higher spend or lower spend if it's used sort of in a less good way. It can increase enjoyment and it can influence brand perception. So how customers kind of go away feeling about your business and their visit. And more specifically, a few studies that back this up. So in 2018, there was a study into how the volume of music actually influenced menu choices. And what was found here was that 20% of diners ordered something unhealthy when exposed to loud music compared to soft music. And basically what was concluded here was that the louder volume increased heart rate and arousal, causing high levels of stress and stimulation. So people were kind of more distracted and less thoughtful about their menu choices. There was then an 8-week study back in 1986 into how the speed of music impacted dwell time in a restaurant. This was carried out over 8 weeks, and the conclusion was that customers that were exposed to slower music spent 11 minutes longer at their table. And similarly, there was a study in retail, again looking into the speed of music and how it impacted dwell time. And this found that slower music caused people to spend longer browsing and actually resulted in a higher spend overall. And of course, very relevant to today's times, music can really help in a sort of post-lockdown COVID world in hospitality. So, for example, you can use music to put your customers at ease, build a buzz back up, and increase perceived busyness. So, for example, if you can't have as many people due to restrictions, it can help to make your venue feel that sort of same sense of energy. It can bring back a sense of familiarity, so making people feel more natural, balance the clinical feeling of COVID safety measures, which are obviously really important, but actually can make a venue feel quite cold and uncomfortable. And overall, just making the experience feel more normal. But sadly, it is easy to get music wrong in hospitality, and it can be influencing your customers' behaviour and their perceptions without you even knowing or thinking much about it. So, for example, just some common kind of mistakes that we see. So explicit lyrics, songs with a negative sentiment that just, maybe the lyrics aren't explicit, but the themes of the music and the particular songs just aren't suitable. A poor choice of genre, wrong tempo or energy levels, inappropriate volume levels, so perhaps either being too loud and intrusive, which again can cause stress in people, or not being audible, in which case your music is having no impact. Or a poor quality sound, for example, so it could be the actual delivery, so the speakers or the position or direction of the speakers. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about using data to successfully inform your music strategy and kind of how we approach this at Startle. So we back our music curation with behavioural science principles to ensure that we're actively curating the atmosphere. And all of the studies that I've discussed so far kind of show that there's a huge opportunity to use music in hospitality. And by using behavioural science, we can ensure that all of the areas, all of the elements of the business's design kind of marry up and ensure that music's not just an afterthought. And your data is key in this. So knowing, for example, your trading patterns, when customers are spending more money, how your busyness changes throughout the seasons, because I'm sure it does in every business, and how customer behaviour changes across different locations, for example. So these are some of the common issues that we come across with how people kind of approach their music in hospitality. So firstly, it's too often left up to personal preference. And this can often be sort of the marketing or the brand team, maybe the founder of the business, or a committee of people. And basically, this can often just result into sort of a lot of people putting suggestions or personal opinions into a hat. And what you're left with is just a playlist of very random songs, and you have no idea about how they're impacting your customers' behaviour or emotions. And lastly, also kind of letting on-site staff take over the music. Just, if you've just got a phone or device that can be easily accessed and overridden, and any sort of strategy just then goes out the window, and anything could happen, really. And similarly, what commonly happens when creating music for hospitality is that sort of unreliable opinion about what customers might want to hear comes into play. And this leads to a lot of assumptions. So, for example, by saying our customers are millennial females, therefore they'll just want to hear chart or pop music, or our target audience is the over 60s with a high disposable income, therefore they'll want to hear some classical or some jazz. And demographics does play a part, but it's not the key element. It shouldn't be the driver of music curation. It should be a filter. So we need something stronger to base our music profiling decisions on. And the way that we recommend approaching this is starting with your objectives. So knowing exactly what you want to achieve with your music before you set out, so that you don't just end up with a nice sounding playlist and wishful thinking. So, for example, your objectives could be to do with dwell time and turnover, increasing spend during specific day parts, driving customers towards specific menu items, so specials, for example, encouraging certain emotions and behaviours, impacting staff morale and productivity, even impacting the sort of pain of queuing or the perceived waiting time. And these can differ by location or by day part, for example. So that's why it's just really important to know what you're starting off with before anything else is decided. So another thing that we start with at Startle is context over demographics. So researchers have argued that actually often the atmosphere is just as influential on buying behaviour as a product itself. And there's a prominent behavioural science sort of notion called the fundamental attribution error, which basically says that too often people try to explain behaviour by putting it down to people's personalities or their demographics, but actually the context, the feeling, the mood they're in is much more influential. So again, demographics should be considered, but they shouldn't lead the profiling process, because not everybody of the same gender or age or with similar interests is going to act the same way, but they're more likely to be collectively impacted by their surroundings. So instead of kind of curating playlists for a certain type of person, look at things like the environment, the location, the weather, the context, the time of day, and kind of start from the ground up with what the ecosystem that the music will exist in looks like and what it needs to achieve. So part of implementing any element of a venue's design should be observing how successful it is. And we use this again in music profiling. There's a really nice quote from David Ogilvy, who's a very successful sort of famous figure in advertising. And that says, people don't think how they feel, say what they think, or do what they say. And what this basically says is it's more powerful and more reliable to observe rather than ask. So observed data was better than questionnaires. And we believe in getting stuff live and seeing the actual impact and how that's better than endless feedback loops or changes based on personal feedback. And just remember that people love to give their opinion. And there's a nice saying along the lines of, if everybody puts in a colour, it turns out grey, which is why we say to avoid designing by committee. So have a plan, use your data and behavioural science, observe and measure what's actually happening. And so I've talked a lot about how music drives behaviour, but we can't forget that, of course, music is emotive. And a lot of action is driven by the type of emotion that a song makes us feel. So it's easy to guess, for example, that a sad song is going to make us feel down, or a happy song will make us feel more upbeat. But there are actually many different elements of music that drive how we feel when we hear the song. So whilst music is emotive and holistic, we use tools and data to accurately predict how an actual song will make a customer feel. So for example, we can compare elements like the valence of a song, so how positive or negative sounding it is, with the arousal, so how active or inactive it makes us. And this basically gives us a reliable indication of the type of emotion that it will elicit. So for example, whether it will make somebody feel elated, serene, lethargic, or upset. And this is something that we use at Startle in line with our clients' objectives to profile their playlists, overlaid with a human ear to sort of sense check and make sure that everything marries up and comes together emotively. And another important notion when profiling music in hospitality is familiarity. So in business and brand resilience, having consistency is really beneficial. So whether it's across a large estate or a smaller business that is scaling. And in behavioural science, there's something called the mere exposure effect, which basically says the more we see it, the more we like it. And this relates to how it's well proven that what we expect to experience heavily weighs what we think we experience. So if we have an amazing first impression in a venue, then we'll see future experiences through that lens. And if we're given the same experience every time, this association gets stronger. So basically, if you can create the perfect atmosphere and replicate this at scale, this will help you to kind of build familiarity, trust, and positivity in your brands. And then our final recommendation is using the data that you have at your fingertips, which there is a lot of. So invest time in looking at your data and extracting useful insight rather than basing decisions on assumptions and estimates. So we know that many hospitality businesses are using a wide variety of tech tools and different softwares, and often these can be integrated with music to add extra value. So for example, whether it's just understanding the needs of different brands, locations, or day parts, adjusting the music to changing behavior and objectives across these day parts, so whether that's across the day, the week, or the year. And it could even be kind of connecting with existing systems that you have in place. So for example, if you've got a Wi-Fi network or a footfall tracker that can give information on the busyness of a venue and how that changes throughout the day or week, we can use that to automatically adjust the music or the volume of music. So for example, that can remove a really mundane task for staff to keep tweaking the volume, and also just ensure that volume's always at the optimum level for the atmosphere. It could be integrating with a weather API, for example, to adapt the music to environmental factors, or connecting other atmospheric elements, so like your digital signage or lighting, just to create a kind of more connected and powerful sensory experience. And so that is all from me. So I hope that was interesting. If you'd like to speak to us, we would love to chat to you, or if you have any questions, please get in contact. And thank you for watching.